Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video was requested by a subscriber. I was asked to show how to set up a machine and thread it. So this is the brand of machine that I use. Mine is computerized, so you see the little digital screen there. Here on this panel are all of the different stitches that my machine can perform. And I do apologize, this video will be a little bit shaky. I was trying to hold my camera with one hand and grab everything and move my machine with the other. So on the right hand side of mine, we have the power button and then the cord which plugs into the wall, which is your power supply. On the back, you have your cord that plugs to the foot pedal and then your sticker that gives you all of the sewing machine model and serial number information. So coming back around to the front of the machine, I'm going to turn it on. You'll see when I hit the power button, the little light comes on the machine and then your needle will set itself. Most of the sewing machines that you can buy today will have a light on them. I think even some really old ones do. I have a antique one that even has a light bulb on it, but this little lever I'm pulling down on here is an automatic needle threader. If you have trouble finding the hole in the needle to get your thread through, I always just thread mine by hand. Then this little pull down lever in the back here with this little square pattern on it, that is for when you're using a buttonholer foot. You will pull this lever down and that is what the presser foot will bump up against to keep it from just running in a straight line all the way down your fabric. And I will do a tutorial, excuse me, I can't speak, on how to do buttonholes on a machine at some point. So in here you have your little needle setup. On the back, mine is a machine that takes snap-on presser feet. So that little black button that you see there, when I push it, releases the presser foot off of the machine. Now some machines will have the kind where you have to undo a screw or a bolt to put a presser foot on. And then there is a little lever next to your needle, and that raises and lowers your presser foot arm. Then on the right hand side again, we have this little dial here. This controls the needle up and down motion. You always want to roll it towards yourself, not backwards. If you roll it backwards, you run the risk of getting your thread tangled up inside the machine. But when you roll it, it will move your needle up and down. You'll use that whenever you get ready to start sewing and then whenever you're threading your bottom bobbin. Here on this little screen shows me my stitch selection and the specifics of it. So here on the side is my guide for which numbers are which stitch. And then if you see the little bitty black dots that are in those circles above those stitches, that shows the needle position for each stitch. Your needle will move sideways depending on which stitch you select. This top number here that shows these dashed lines are how far apart your stitches are going to be. So if I raise my number up, they're going to be a little bit longer stitches. If I lower it, they're going to be shorter stitches. The zigzag number refers to if you're sewing a zigzag stitch, how wide each zigzag is going to be, but if you're sewing a straight stitch, you can use that button to change the position of your needle as you see here. And some presser feet that you will buy will not line up perfectly with your needle being in the center, how it's usually programmed, so that is when you will use that button to set them in the correct position that you need. So then if I select a stitch from over here on the right, let's say I'm going to do stitch number 12, I will use the arrows here and get to the number 12. You will see as I move those buttons, the position of the needle changes. So it goes from a left sitting needle to a center sitting needle, and then if I change it back, it moves back to its original position. Now my machine has this little box on the front of it that pulls off. That holds my little tools that came with my machine. And every machine, if you look underneath, has a little space below the table, that is for when you are sewing sleeves or pants legs, so that you just slide them over the end of the machine here and they run right up under your needle, so you don't have to rip the side seam apart and make them flat to sew them. This little bag has my little like screwdriver that came with my machine to get the bottom plate off so that I can clean it out, and the presser feet. Most machines will come with a standard presser foot, which is what you see on my machine right now, a zipper foot, and usually a buttonhole foot. This plate here, the gray plastic one, is the snap-on plate that covers your bottom bobbin. So you see the lever there takes the plastic top off, and that lever in the back takes the whole plate off. This is for when you're ready to thread the bottom bobbin on your machine. So when I pull that little side lever, you'll see the plastic cover comes off. This is what you run your thread through. Now this black piece that I just took out, we'll look at in a second. This is the inner workings of your machine here. These are the parts that you will clean and oil regularly. Now this black piece right here is your bottom bobbin housing. Inside you'll see a little silver plate. That's where your thread actually goes through for the tension. And then on the front, it's hard to see the green, but this screw regularly had green paint on it, and most machines will have green. It might be another color, but typically green is used. That is your tension screw, and that adjusts how much tension is on your bottom thread on the bottom bobbin. Typically, you won't have to mess with that unless you're going to do something like shirring fabric with elastic thread. Then you'll need to tighten it all the way. But for the most part, you don't want to mess with that because it has been factory set to where it needs to be. And you can turn it too much and then forget how much you turned it and mess it up. So I would not adjust that screw unless you absolutely had to. So on the left-hand side, you see the little diagram that shows us how to thread our bottom bobbin. So I'm going to sit the bobbin in the machine. Then our thread goes around this little arm right here and into that space. And then it is supposed to be wrapped around. And where that arrow ends, it's hard to see, but there's a little silver like razor blade in there. You pull the thread against that and it cuts it off for you. And then we're ready to put our little plastic cap on. This keeps your bobbin from bouncing out of the machine while you're sewing. So now our bottom bobbin is ready to go. If I go back up to the top of the machine, most machines, I think all new machines, but even some older ones, have this little mechanism, which is an automatic bobbin threader. So you put your empty bobbin on that peg, push it backwards to set it, and then when you hit your foot pedal, it will wind thread on it. The long arm back here is what you actually use when you are sewing, and mine, it can be folded in and snapped, as you see there, for when you're transporting it so it doesn't get broken off. And then when you're ready to sew, you open it up. They will always have a little washer that looks like this that holds your bobbin onto that spool holder, I guess is what it's called, so that it doesn't come off the end while you're sewing. So here's our diagram. If we want to thread a bobbin, it shows us how to wind it to get it over to that little short peg. We're going to sew, so we're going to use the diagram that shows us for using the back peg here. So we start running through this little silver hook on the back. Then it will come around this arm here. That is our upper tension. So you're going to run it underneath. You can see a silver plate there, and there is a little bitty line in that plate that your thread actually sits in. So in all of the parts on my machine where the thread needs to go are labeled. You'll see these numbers. That tells me what order to do it in. But if your machine is not labeled, it is the same basic concept. It will go through some sort of tension, then loop around your needle mechanism that moves up and down, and then it goes down inside of your needle. So when I move the dial on the side of the machine, you see this little silver arm inside of there come up and down. That is the needle arm moving up and down, and what you see moving is the piece that holds your thread. So then it goes through there, and then we come down and you see step number 5, which is the last step, is to come down and through that little bar that you see in front of the needle. So we're going to go ahead and thread our top bobbin. I'm going to start by sliding it on, and then we're going to put the little washer on to hold it. And what this is for, you want to push it so that your bobbin is pressed up against the back of that bar. You don't want it sliding forwards and backwards while the machine is running, because it will wrap your thread up and tangle, and then your thread will break, and you can possibly break the needle while you're sewing. So we're going through the hook, that's step number 1, then around our tension arm there. And number 2 is down. Number 3 was around that white part. And then number 4 tells us to move it in a square on the back. You can see the line there, looks like a square, so you go all the way to the back of the machine. And then around, that puts it around that little metal pole inside. And then down on my machine, I just have to take my finger, which is hard when I'm holding the camera, but you take your finger and you just sort of push that thread in behind that bar there, and you'll see it come in front. So there it is running behind that bar, and now I just have to take it through the hole on my needle. I always do mine by hand, so I have to put the camera down for this part. Now I do apologize, the camera got a little bit blurry here. I didn't realize it wasn't focused. But all I've done is push the thread through the eye of the needle. I'm going to pull it all the way through so that there's no loops or tangles in it. And then I'm going to run it, and you always want your thread facing to the back of the machine. So now I've pulled the bottom thread through. All I did to get that bottom thread through is rolled my needle with that dial down in, pulled it up, and then if you pull on the top thread, it will pull out your bottom one. Here you'll see with all of them out already, it creates a little knot. That knot is what actually pulls your bottom thread up whenever you're first threading it. And then you'll pull about a 4 to 5 inch length of thread and let it hang to the back of the machine. So coming down onto the floor, we'll find our our sewing machine foot, or our power foot. So it's wider on one end and narrow on the other. The wide end is the end that you will push on to make the machine run. My machine's speed is controlled by the foot also, so the harder I press on it, the faster the machine runs. Some machines will have a manual speed. I'll show you one in a minute. So I just have a scrap piece of fabric here. I'm just going to show you when you are ready to sew. You will position your fabric where you want it. Drop your presser foot down onto the material. That holds it in place so it does not slide around. And my machine actually will not operate unless my presser foot is down. So then you're going to roll your needle down into the thread, your needle down into the fabric to get your thread down in there. And then you just follow, if you're doing a certain length of seam, you'll follow your grid here on the side is marked with numbers, and then on my presser foot there are 2 little notches. The first notch is a 1/4 inch and the second notch is 1/2 inch, and that tells you how wide the seam is going to be. So I pushed lightly, a little bit harder, and now as hard as I can, and that is as fast as my machine will go. So now whenever you're ready to take it out, we're going to have to move our presser foot and our needle. So you move your needle first with that dial, pull it all the way up, then pull your presser foot up. And just like your thread needs to go to the back of the machine, you want to pull your finished material to the back of the machine also instead of forward. And then you'll see once I get to the back, I have a thread cutter on my machine, which is that little knob that you see. And some of the new fancier computerized machines will cut thread automatically with a button that you push on it. Mine has the manual thread cutter, so you just run it through there, or you could always just snip it with scissors if you're more comfortable doing that, or if your machine doesn't have one. So that is our little line that we sewed. Now, once it's time for you to sew, depending on what kind of material you are sewing, you'll need to adjust the tension on your bobbin. That's done with this little dial up here. The higher the number, the more tension or more pull is on the thread, and the lower the number, the easier the thread slides through. So then over here, this is my daughter's little machine. This is an Easy Home brand machine from Aldi, and it is a really nice little machine. If your store starts carrying them, I think I paid $40 for this, and it is well worth the money. So her speed adjustment is there on the machine here. This is the back stitch button. Mine is just a little button that you push on the computerized machine. On a manual machine, it is a lever that you have to pull down on to back stitch, and then her speed is adjusted here. So she has a low speed and a high speed. And some machines will have a button with arrows. You'll have 1 arrow, 2 arrows, and 3 arrows. 1 arrow being the slowest speed and 3 being the fastest speed. So here is her stitch selection. On a manual machine, it's done with a dial instead of the little computer buttons like I have. So you'll find your stitch and turn your dial. Every machine has your needle dial. Here is her automatic bobbin threader, and it is always the same on every machine. You push it backwards to engage the threading. So here is her little bobbin spool. Hers stands upright on her machine, whereas mine was laying horizontal. Again, the washer to hold it in place. Now her threading is a little bit different. I have to go through 2 steps before I go around mine. Hers just comes through this little section here and then around that button looking item, and then it comes down, of course, and then up just like on my machine. And then hers, instead of having a slit in the bar, it's just a circle. So her bar comes out away from the machine to thread, and then you have a circle again above the needle that it has to go through before you wind it through the needle. And for her bottom bobbin, she does not have the little circular mechanism to run the thread through. So all you do is sit the bobbin down in there, and then you'll pull your thread out to the side and let it hang out, and then pull it up with your needle arm, and then you'll put the cap back on. So that was all for this video on setting up a machine. I hope it was helpful at least a little bit. If you enjoyed it, let me know and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.